Proceed.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for this opportunity to bring my bill, Senate Bill number 166. I'm Senator Jill Carter representing Jasper and Newton County. SB166 adds language to Chapter 167 that bars city and county officials from interfering in curriculum choices and hiring decisions by public schools, private schools, and homeschools. The amendment is relative to Missouri's current political landscape. Here's why. Municipal interference in employment decision and curriculum choices would undermine the ability of schools to hire administrators, staff, teachers who adhere to
Can you speak a little bit closer to the microphone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Part of this plan includes fines and or criminal penalties for noncompliance. The city would also withhold business license, occupancy permits, or other permits that private schools and homeschool associations need to operate. The proposed language seeks to remedy this interference, and for this reason, I ask for your support on SB 166. And I'll take any questions.
We're going to go ahead and pause here and go ahead and take roll.
Chairman Koenig.
Here.
Vice Chair Bratton. Senators Arthur. Beck. Gannon. Hoskins. Razor. Schroer. Trent.
All right, we have established quorum. Questions for the bill sponsor? Seeing none, first witness testifying in support of Senate Bill 166. Seeing none, anybody testifying in opposition to Senate Bill 166? Anybody testifying for informational purposes only on 166? All right, well that was quick.
Thank you so much.
Yep. All right, I will now pass this over to Gannon so I can present Senate Bill 410. It's Senate Bill 410.
You may begin. Senate Bill 410. Make sure, okay, go right ahead.
All right. Thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to present Senate Bill 410. Senator Andrew Koenig from the 15th District out of St. Louis County. This bill deals with diversity, equity, and inclusion when it's related to our medical schools, obtaining a medical license, or continuing education. And the question is, should requirements for medical doctors be watered down by DEI training? Do you want the best brain surgeon operating on your brain as possible, or someone who has a strong DEI statement? Nearly everyone wants to know that their medical doctor is competent at the job that they do. The LCME is the medical education that is the only nationally recognized accrediting authority for medical education programs that lead to an MD degree in the United States and Canada. There have been some concerns that removing DEI will cause a loss of accreditation. The reality is some universities across the country have already done this. The University of North Carolina has removed all DEI, including in their medical schools, and yet they remain fully accredited. In Texas, the AMM system also has removed all DEI. In an executive order, they say that no university or agency in the ANM system will admit any student nor hire any employee based on a factor, only on the factor of merit, and removed all DEI. There are numerous other states that are looking to remove all DEI, including Florida, South Carolina, Kansas, Oklahoma, and others as well. Recently, the University of Missouri have cut all DEI from their hiring practices as well. The question is DEI effective at accomplishing its goal of better health outcomes or more diversity in the healthcare workforce? And both seem to fail to accomplish this. There was a study last year from the HHS Public Access which says diversity training goals, limitations, and promise, a review of multidisciplinary literature that stated several things. Stated, we suggest that the enthusiasm for monetary investment in diversity training has outpaced the available evidence that suggests programs are effective in achieving their goals. As such, the rationale for supporting a cultural competence approach remains circular and rests strongly on theoretical benefits of cultural competence rather than rigorous empirical evidence with respect to client outcomes. The goal of Senate Bill 410 is simple: to remove all DEI from medical schools because there is no evidence that supports that their stated goals of increased health outcomes or increase in diversity in the medical field. Obviously, I don't want to affect the accreditation of any of our medical schools in this state, and we may have to make changes to the bill. However, what we've seen across the country is that for the most part, this has not happened by removing DEI. With that, I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Arthur.
Morning. I'm still a little unclear about what problem it is you're trying to solve. So is your presumption that because we now have DEI as part of medical training that somehow the standards for medical practice are weakened?
Sure. I mean, in order to get into medical school, it's not based on merit, right? Like whether you can, whether the likelihood that you'll make it through medical school, has not increased. But
I think there are probably some who would take exception to that argument that it's not based on merit anymore. I think there's still a lot of competition to get into medical school, and the people who are there have made certain academic benchmarks.
I'm not saying that all merit has been taken away, by no means, but if in order to get into medical school they require a DEI statement, that has no bearing on whether or not you're going to be a good doctor. So you could say that is a lowering of a standard, if that is a requirement.
So your bill does a lot more than just, I don't even know if, I can't remember if your bill addresses DEI statements, but your bill is much broader than
Sure.
just that.
Sure. And I mean, it may have to be narrowed a little bit to make sure that there's no effects of accreditation or loss of money, federal funds.
So I'm sure you're familiar with the concept or the term like health disparity, right?
Sure, and I think most of those are usually more economical. There may be some genetic components, obviously, like, for instance, sickle cell anemia affects African Americans at higher rates due to a genetic mutation in malaria. But I would say most disparities are more economical.
Well, there are different kinds of health disparities. There are disparities in terms of access to health care. There are disparities in terms of health outcomes. And I guess if we want physicians to be sensitive to the fact that in Missouri we are economically diverse, we are geographically diverse, we are racially, we are diverse in all kinds of ways. As part of that, is it not appropriate to, and especially in certain communities, there are historic reasons why people are skeptical of the healthcare system and industry. And I guess I think being sensitive to those concerns and trying to provide the best care for patients based on their walk of life or their various backgrounds, like I only see that as a benefit.
But there's no evidence that actually takes place.
Well,
from
even,
what I've seen.
I mean, even, it's related, but there was an interesting article yesterday about DSS's use of diversity and inclusion training. And the director stated that it has actually been very successful in recruiting and retaining workforce, which has been the #1 issue for DSS. And they said that it helps people feel a sense of belonging. It helps people perform better in their roles, and it has had a very important impact in keeping people at the department. So I know that that's just a related example. It's not exactly what your bill would address, but I think it speaks to the reasons why people see benefit in DEI work. So maybe we'll just disagree on this, and I'm sure there are witnesses who can bring some clarity too. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Senator Hoskins.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, I agree what you're trying to do here as far as DEI. I would agree that we want the students that are going to be the best doctors, going to be the best surgeons, regardless of how well they write a DEI statement. And I would take it one step further. The new buzzword is belonging. I don't know if you've heard about this. So we've got positions in
or
jurisdiction.
blind spots.
Yes, blind spots are, we actually, they're in Department of Natural Resources, they're advertising for a belonging leader. I don't really know what a belonging leader is, but as a member of the Senate Appropriations staff, I look forward to looking for belonging leaders because that's something that I don't think that we really need in state government. So I appreciate what you're doing. I agree that, hey, we want the best students, we want the best surgeons, we want the best doctors, regardless of whether or not they have a great DEI statement. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, we will begin with in support of, first witness in support of Senate Bill 410.
Good morning. My name is Benita Cotton Orr, and I am not from around here, as you can hear from my accent. And I really appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony in support of this legislation, which I believe would help ensure the residents of Missouri and assure them that their health care and their higher education are focused on excellence. I'm a senior fellow with Do No Harm, a national medical advocacy group, but by way of background, I am from Georgia, and I moved to Georgia from South Africa in 1986. I spent 14 years as a journalist at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I was on the editorial board when I was invited to join the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, which is a state think tank, and I spent 19 years there. If you ask why is that relevant, I will tell you that I am so appreciative of the opportunity to speak here and to speak in Georgia to public policy issues because I did not have a voice or a vote in the country where I was born. As a native of South Africa, I was raised under apartheid. I suffered under its oppressive dictates, and I know full well the harm that racial discrimination can impose on a society, and I'm consequently vehemently opposed to any kind of racial discrimination, racial bias, or racial preference. I know about being at the back of the line, about being relegated to race-based education, race-based policies, and race-based health care. Sadly, today in my homeland, the country of my birth, the family, the friends, and the community I left behind continue to live that as that country tries to build its way out of the legacy of apartheid. South Africa's government, unfortunately, has again embraced racial discrimination. It's just now that people of a different color get the racial preferential treatment. And I can't sit idly by and watch as America, which I chose as my new home, goes the way of my former home. I believe the way out of racial discrimination is not through the dangerous and divisive diversity, equity, and inclusion teachings that this country's students and healthcare professionals are being subjected to across the nation. Whether in rhetoric or in reality, DEI, I believe, is doublespeak. The talk is about diversity, but unless you think like its proponents, you're not embracing diversity. Equity becomes a euphemism for ensuring equal outcomes, while equality of access and treatment are shunted aside in that effort, whether in healthcare, in higher education, or in the workplace. And inclusion purports to welcome all ideas and groups, yet works to exclude those who would believe differently. The medical community especially could impose serious harm by embracing DEI. Medical college should focus not on political propaganda, but on medical training that ensures that every future physician will be the best that he or she can be. Patients deserve the best physician for their medical condition, not someone selected for their racial or their ethnic background. Patients deserve to get treatment based on the care they need, not to be relegated to the front or the back of the line based on the color of their skin. But, as nice as it sounds, the anti-racism foundation of DEI isn't about opposing racism. Its founder, Ibram Kendi, maintains that the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. Wrong is wrong, and two wrongs don't make a right. So I'm here today to urge passage of this legislation and to commend legislators for this bill. Missouri's taxpayers shouldn't have to fund extreme racial politics in higher education, and no patient should be questioning whether they are the victim of racial discrimination in their medical care, and every medical professional should focus on the best health care, medical excellence, not ideology. I believe that DEI is bad news for Missouri, and I believe it's bad news for this country. Thank you. And I'm willing to take any questions, and I will submit my testimony.
Thank you. I'll just ask you a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
If Mizzou or UMKC add DEI curriculum to their medical programs, has the academic year increased in length, or has medical curriculum been cut?
I'm going to say if you're focusing your time on a curriculum that is not embracing medical excellence, then you are in fact cutting into your academic time.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, in support, next witness in support of the bill. Seeing none, the first witness in opposition to the bill. Make sure you fill out a witness form, state your name, and you may begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jay Devanini. I'm a medical student at the University of Missouri Columbia School of Medicine, and I was previously a medical student at the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Medicine. I am also the Legislative and Advocacy Chair for Mizzou Medical Society, which is my medical school's student-run policy and advocacy group. I am speaking on behalf of Mizzou Medical Society, as well as 220 Mizzou medical students and 400 plus UMKC medical students and alumni who have signed our position statement opposing Senate Bill 410. In front of you, you will find a packet of letters that I am including as part of my testimony. The first letter is from Dr. Stephen Zweig, who was Dean of the Mizzou School of Medicine from 2019 until 2022, and was the chairman of our family medicine department for the decade prior to that. With this letter, he is going on record in opposition to this bill. The second letter is the Mizzou medical student statement against this bill, and the third letter is the UMKC medical student statement against this bill, with the names of the aforementioned signees. The fourth letter is from the Region 2 Board of the Medical Student Section of the American Medical Association, which comprises medical student leaders from 6 different states in the Midwest, including Missouri. They also oppose this bill. In short, there are a few primary reasons why all of these groups, including myself, oppose this bill. The first is the issue of accreditation. Senate Bill 410 would prohibit state-funded medical schools in Missouri from requiring students to study concepts related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, including concepts such as health equity, social determinants of health, and implicit bias. Regardless of what the chairman of this committee says, this would put us in direct violation of the accreditation standards of our schools. The Commission on Osteopathic College Accreditation, which accredits all DO schools in the U.S., including 2 medical schools in Missouri, explicitly states the following in element 6.13 of its accreditation standards. Quote, a COM, that's a College of Osteopathic Medicine, must incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion into its curriculum. End quote. The Liaison Committee on Medical Education, which accredits all MD schools in the U.S., including Mizzou and UMKC, states this in Standard 7.6 of its accreditation standards. Quote, the medical curriculum includes content regarding the following: the diverse manner in which people perceive health and illness and respond to various symptoms, diseases, and treatments, the basic principles of culturally and structurally competent healthcare, the importance of healthcare disparities and health inequities, the impact of disparities in healthcare on all populations and approaches to reduce healthcare disparities, healthcare inequities, that is, the knowledge, skills, and core professional attributes needed to provide effective care in a multidimensional and diverse society, end quote. Clearly, this is describing diversity, equity, and inclusion as it is defined in Senate Bill 410. As such, Senate Bill 410 would jeopardize the accreditation of our medical schools, without which our medical degrees would be virtually worthless. This, in turn, would impede our ability to meet the physician workforce demands of our state, particularly in rural and other underserved areas. The second reason why we oppose this bill is because of the important role that diversity, equity, and inclusion concepts play in medical education. There are many well-established and well-researched health disparities in the U.S., with rural, minority, low socioeconomic status, and other underserved populations suffering disproportionately high rates of disease. DEI education is a critical component of our medical training because it teaches us about the social determinants that underpin these disparities. If these concepts are removed from our core curriculum, it would stifle our school's ability to train culturally competent physicians. This would prevent us from providing the best care for our patients, as cultural competency is associated with better health outcomes, increased patient satisfaction, and reduced per capita costs. And you can see our evidence in the citations we use in our letters. The third reason why we oppose this bill is because it would force all medical schools in the state to require the MCAT as a prerequisite for admission. This wouldn't affect most medical schools in Missouri, but it would have a profound effect on the UMKC School of Medicine. The UMKC School of Medicine is one of the most unique medical schools in the country in that it accepts students into medical school straight out of high school and allows them to complete their bachelor's and medical degrees in a combined 6-year program. The UMKC Medical School draws an extremely competitive pool of in-state applicants because of this accelerated structure. And one of the privileges of being in this program is that you do not have to take the MCAT since you have already been pre-accepted into medical school at the time of high school graduation. If the school is forced to use the MCAT as an admission requirement, it would fundamentally undermine the design of this program, remove one of the program's best incentives, and likely reduce the number and quality of applicants. This, in turn, would stifle UMKC's ability to accept and train high-quality medical graduates, which would be a problem for Missouri because UMKC is one of the largest suppliers of physicians in our state. A few final points I would like to make to address the comments and concerns of the previous witness and the chairman of this committee. Number one, this idea that diversity is reducing the academic standards or the academic ability of our medical students. My class, the class of 2025, was the most diverse class in the history of our medical school. My class also had the highest average MCAT score of any class in the history of my medical school. So this idea that diversity reduces the academic standards is simply false. Number two, there's a lot of speculation about what DEI is doing in medical education from people who are not in medical school. Let me tell you what's happening as someone who is in medical school right now. It is not watering down of our curriculum. Nothing in our scientific curriculum is being replaced. There are many core scientific concepts that we have always learned and that we will continue to learn. And in fact, the scientific curriculum is getting more and more robust as we begin to improve our understanding of science. So DEI education isn't replacing anything. It's not reducing academic standards for admission or for educational standards. All it's doing is enhancing our understanding of clinical medicine and patient care. So for those reasons, we oppose Senate Bill 410 and urge the committee members to vote against it. If passed, it would threaten our accreditation, it would impede our ability to address Missouri's physician shortages, and it would stifle our ability to train physicians who can practice high-quality, patient-centered care. Thank you for your time, and I'm available for questions.
Any questions from the committee members? Senator Arthur?
Thank you for your testimony. Just to clarify, you feel adequate, all of the requirements are still in place to become a licensed physician, right?
Yes.
And you feel adequately prepared for your boards, for meeting all of those requirements. Does DEI make you feel better prepared, or it certainly doesn't make you feel less prepared, right?
Yeah, absolutely does not make us feel less prepared. Like I said, all of the scientific concepts that we need to know for our board exams, for our licensing exams, for our shelf exams, we are learning those more than at an adequate level. And DEI really just improves our ability to understand those concepts. And it's not just about passing exams, right? It's about providing the highest quality of care we can to our future patients. And that's where DEI really can be important, because it's not something you can just read out of a textbook or understand. It's something that you have to live through and that you have to consider when you're treating your patients, what their background is, what different disease processes they might be prone to, those sorts of things. So really, we are as prepared as we always have been, and DEI only enhances our preparedness for both our exams and our future careers.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other questions from committee? Seeing none, thank you. Next witness in opposition. Please fill out a witness form and state your name.
Good morning. My name is Terry Murray, Dr. Terry Murray, and I'm speaking to you this morning on behalf of the Missouri Nurses Association. And I have held many nursing positions over my 40-year career, and I've seen a lot that I would really like to share with this committee. However, given the limited time that I have, I want to share with you the perspectives that I've gained after having served on the Missouri State Board of Nursing as the president, where I chaired the board's Nursing Education Committee, which had regulatory oversight of all the nursing education programs throughout Missouri. One major concern that I have is accreditation. Despite what has been said this morning by others in opposition, the American Association of Colleges of Nursing require diversity, equity, and inclusion and social determinants of health as part of the nursing curriculum. While some of you may be familiar with how schools of nursing in Missouri get authorized to offer programs and confer degrees, there may be some on the committee that don't fully understand the process. So I'd like to take a brief moment to explain how it works. In order for any school to enroll and educate students, they need approval from a national or regional accrediting agency. These accreditors are not overseen by the state of Missouri. They often authorize schools to operate in different states and ultimately set the rules and guidelines for what schools must do in order to operate. Whether colleges like it or not, they have no choice but to follow these guidelines. One of my major concerns with this legislation is that many of the prohibitions that would be put in place are in direct violation of the guidelines being mandated by the accrediting agencies. If this bill were to pass, it would be impossible for any nursing school in the state of Missouri, and that includes all the large nursing schools in the state of Missouri, to be in compliance with both state law and accreditation rules. Schools of nursing must be accredited to offer degree programs. If schools lose their accreditation, no nursing school could confer degrees or graduate nursing students who would be eligible to take the licensure exam. The outcome is that there would be no Missouri-educated nurses to care for Missouri citizens. Also, the Joint Commission of Accreditation for Healthcare Organizations and its new requirements effective January 1, 2023 requires its accrediting organizations to identify health disparities in its population by stratifying and looking at data using socio-demographic characteristics, and that is age, gender, preferred language, race, and ethnicity, and students must be taught to do this. Nurses must be prepared to care for the unique healthcare needs of communities in Missouri. SB410 bans discussions on health equity and the social determinants of health. Health equity simply means every Missourian has a fair and just opportunity to be as healthy as possible. Who would not want that for Missouri citizens? The social determinants of health mean that the conditions where people live, learn, work, and play can impact health. If you live in a home with lead-based paint, the children are likely to have toxic lead levels. Or if you live in an environment that's high with pollutants, the family may be prone to asthma. Healthcare providers must understand how environments affect health to provide the necessary health care. Understanding environments is critical to appropriate health screening and health care. So for these reasons, I am in opposition to Senate Bill 410.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Next witness in opposition.
Thank you.
Good morning, Senator Koenig and the committee members. My name is Kelly Doherty, and I'm a family medicine resident physician here to share testimony in opposition of Senate Bill 410. I'm representing both myself and the Missouri Academy of Family Physicians. I'm going to leave the data and definitions to people much wiser than I am in order to share my lived experiences as a 2022 graduate of the University of Missouri School of Medicine. While in medical school, I learned a lot about all the education aspects that have been mentioned today. I learned about physiology and pathology and treatments for my future patients. But it would not have mattered how much science I learned. That never could have prepared me to actually take care of patients. Providing the best care for my patients means understanding the social determinants of health that make them who they are. The passing of Senate Bill 410 would prevent our health profession schools from teaching curriculums on social determinants of health, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know we've mentioned that this morning. So this learning is necessary not only for us to become skilled physicians and practitioners, but it's also necessary for the accreditation. I will include a letter from Dr. Grant Huxema, who's very involved in the American Academy of Family Physicians and the residency directors, and he cites specific citations that we would be violating if we do not teach DEI in our family medicine residency curriculums. So a little bit more about me. I grew up in Craig, Missouri. It's a town of about 200 people in the northwest part of the state. and I have a passion for providing health care for rural Missourians. My education at the University of Missouri enabled me to participate in the Rural Track Pipeline program, and this allowed me to learn more about the social determinants of health unique to rural patients, because it's very different. And I wanted to know that to be able to provide the best care for them. Additionally, side note, I was pre-admitted to medical school through the Bryant Scholars Program at the University of Missouri, which works to provide rural physicians for our state. And they looked at my diversity to admit me to that program, because I am a rural Missourian and I will be proud to go back and serve there. So they used my diversity to admit me. And this Rural Track Pipeline program allowed me to learn so many things that even though I was living in rural Missouri, I had no idea that these things were defining the health of myself and my family members. I learned that rural Missourians have higher rates of suicide, and actually counterintuitive to like my thought process, they actually have less access to fruits and vegetables in their food deserts, even though we think of rural Missouri having agriculture and all this access to healthy food. And rotating in rural areas allowed me to personally witness the social determinants of health unique to these rural patients. I saw the transportation struggles of getting to appointments and driving long distances, and the poor broadband internet connectivity making even telehealth visits hard for our rural Missourians. And like I said, I had lived these realities. I'd lived in rural Missouri, but until I'd had education on these factors, I had no idea that these factors were even defining the level of health I could achieve or my family could achieve. So as I mentioned, I have plans to return to rural Missouri to be a family physician and provide equitable care to these patients. But I'm currently completing my residency at Mercy in St. Louis. So there I see patients with a whole different host of social determinants, patients from other countries and different racial and ethnic backgrounds that I was definitely not exposed to in rural Missouri. And if my medical school had not trained me to provide equitable care to those diverse populations, I would not be able to provide effective care for those patients, no matter how much science I learned. And I really want to emphasize that. And I'd also, if I hadn't learned DEI, I would not be able to live up to the Oath of Geneva, which I took when I graduated medical school. And I took an oath to not permit considerations of age, disease, creed, ethnic origin, gender, nationality, political affiliation, race, sexual orientation, social standing, or any other factor intervene between my duty and my patient. And this is why diversity, equity, and inclusion education in our medical and health profession schools is so important. It helps the next generation of physicians like myself to truly understand the intricacies of the struggles of our underserved and underrepresented patients. And it's going to allow us to provide better care for those who most so desperately need it. So myself and the Missouri Academy of Family Physicians oppose Senate Bill 410 and support allowing Missouri health training sites to continue to educate the future physicians and medical professionals that will be caring for both my family and yours all across this great state.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none. Normally we allow about 3 minutes for witnesses, but due to the nature of this bill, I'm allowing a little bit more time. So next in opposition. Please state your name.
Chair, members of the committee, my name is Cassie Brown, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Social Workers, Missouri Chapter. NASW opposes this bill. Missouri social workers serve in behavioral health and healthcare settings across Missouri, from schools to hospice, including hospitals and mental health settings. The Council on Social Work Education does require diversity, equity, and inclusion to credit schools, including Missouri's 16 accredited schools of social work, which provide social work education and social workers for our much needed mental health and healthcare settings. And this bill does inhibit continuing education. Continuing education is vital to ensuring that we are prepared to work with all people. Education on diversity is a very broad topic, including organizations and clinicians, and addresses all elements, including race, ethnicity, aging, and gender. Passing this bill would have a chilling effect on continuing education. Presenters and educators like me may fear including elements of difference in courses that are necessary, including accreditation. I once worked at a psychiatric hospital. This is just one example. A client I worked with was a Bhutanese immigrant and was diagnosed with psychosis because she described constant paranoia of being watched, dread of doctors burning her feet, and constant nightmares, awake and asleep, of family members dying. Through cultural research that I had to conduct on my own due to lack of education on Southeast Asian and Asian immigrants, I discovered that she was part of an ethnic minority that had been isolated, tortured, and sometimes brutally killed as part of a countrywide cultural genocide called Bhutanization. Now, it occurred in the 1980s. Now, this took a long time for us to discover. It changed our entire team's treatment of this woman from psychosis to PTSD, as her experiences were based in actual real-life trauma. Cultural diversity training saves lives. Now, as has been mentioned, elderly, white, rural males have some of the highest suicide rates in Missouri, and clinicians need to know that. That could not be addressed as a social determinant of health under this bill. Black women experience high rates of PTSD and may be wrongly diagnosed with things such as bipolar disorder. If clinicians do not recognize that, that requires continuing education as well as DEI training. Social workers need to know how to ask questions that are appropriate to each and every population for best treatment. This bill would cause harm across the board. For these reasons and more, NASW Missouri social workers strongly oppose this bill. Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none. Next in opposition.
Thank you.
Try not to repeat what has already been said. State your name, and you may begin.
All right. Members of the committee, my name is Sesidar Karparthi. I'm a medical student at the University of Missouri School of Medicine, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself in opposition of Senate Bill 410. So without repeating what other members, my colleagues from in medical school have said, I wanted to talk a little bit about DEI curriculum and how it's important for our medical education. As medical students, through our DEI curriculum, we learn about what are known as social determinants of health, which are defined by the Department of Health and Human Services as the conditions in the environments where people are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, and age that affect a wide range of health, function, and quality of life outcomes and risks. One of the biggest determinants of health is the social and community context in which one lives in, which includes race and ethnicity. Many peer-reviewed studies have shown that minority, low socioeconomic status, rural, and other underserved populations suffer disproportionately high rates of disease. A commonly used metric to evaluate the equity of healthcare is life expectancy. And unfortunately, in Missouri, the discrepancy in life expectancy between those of Caucasian and African descent is abysmal. For white Americans, it is 77.6 years compared to 72.4 years for black Americans. Another metric that is commonly used to track racial disparities in healthcare is the maternal mortality rate. For black Americans in Missouri in 2018, the mortality rate was 87.6 per 100,000 live births, which was 4 times greater than that for white women and 2 times greater than the national average for black women, which means that we know that in Missouri, racial disparities are greater than they are nationwide, and they are not ideal. As future physicians, it is our responsibility to be aware of the myriad of disparities that exist in the field of healthcare and barriers that our different patients face in order to see us, get the medications that we prescribe, or receive the procedures that we perform. A lack of DEI education will prevent us from realizing the barriers that our patients face in obtaining our care and would lead to poor health outcomes for minority groups. Furthermore, prohibiting DEI requirements is also likely to reduce the diversity of our medical school community. Research has shown that institutions with deeply ingrained DEI principles and practices are more likely to attract students and faculty from structurally excluded backgrounds. If our school is unable to weave DEI principles into the central fabric of its curriculum, then students from backgrounds that are underrepresented in medicine are likely to choose schools where they feel more represented, or if they're not accepted into other programs, be forced to attend a school where they do not feel valued. This would be a problem not only for those students, but also for patients, as diversity in healthcare and workforce diversity in the healthcare workforce is associated with reduced health disparities, improved patient care, and better financial performance, as shown by a systematic review of 675 studies published in the medical literature. Furthermore, DEI curriculum is essential for our medical education in that our licensee exams, USMLE Step 1, Step 2, and Step 3, which are required for us in order to graduate from medical school and become licensed practicing physicians in the United States of America, do test us on these DEI principles. So preventing medical students in the state of Missouri from learning these principles will cause us to not do nearly as well on our exams as we otherwise would, and potentially cause students to fail their licensing exams, which would obviously be detrimental to medical students as well as our medical universities. So that concludes my testimony for today. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, next in opposition. Please state your name, fill out a witness form, and you may begin.
Members of the committee, my name is Cameron Hake. I'm speaking on behalf of myself as a third-year medical student at the University of Missouri. I'd like to go on record in opposition to Senate Bill 410. As you are aware, and as we have extensively discussed, this bill would prohibit the teaching of DEI in medical schools, which includes discussions around the social determinants of health. To outline why this would be extremely harmful to the development of us as physicians, I'd like you to take a second and think of what you think of when you think of a good primary care physician. While I realize it's impossible for you to reply to me right now, when I think of a primary care physician, I think of someone who listens to me, who takes the time to get to know me, thinks of what treatment plans fit my best personal needs. A good primary care physician is familiar with their community, understands its strengths and its weaknesses, and helps patients to optimize their personal health. I could go on about what a primary care should strive to do, but from this initial few sentences, I hope that I've conveyed that a primary care and medicine in general is more than simply understanding medical knowledge. To serve our patients, we must understand our community to the best of our ability. We must understand the broader context of issues that affect our patients. While this may feel abstract, I feel it's best understood through examples. For example, diabetes and obesity are issues that I believe most of us at least know somebody who struggles with. With that, it comes as no surprise that the initial treatment recommendations would be diet and exercise. But let's say that this person lives in an inner city where they have no reliable form of transportation, and the nearest grocery store is several miles away. And the closest thing to you in that instance would be a gas station, where you were obviously not buying correct food. Similar things would be, similarly, for those of you who are representing communities with higher rates of violence, forms of exercise that we would initially think of as easy include running and walking. But in that instance, it's not safe for people to run and walk, particularly whenever it's not daylight hours. Think of this in terms of wintertime, when daylight hours are working hours. People are not able to safely perform what we would think of as traditional forms of exercise. Thus, to care for this person, we cannot simply know the correct treatment option. We must understand their needs and additional concerns that affect them. These issues are what we call the social determinants of health, which play an undeniable role in affecting one's healthcare outcomes. This bill would prohibit us from learning these critical issues, which cannot only be detrimental to our competitiveness as physicians when applying to residencies, but would have catastrophic outcomes on the patients that we serve. DEI and social determinants of health are what separate physicians from someone who has access to a series of textbooks and is proficient in Google searching. The difficult part of medical knowledge is not knowing the correct treatment for a disease, it's knowing the correct treatment for that specific person. It's knowing who might benefit from a treatment and what limiting factors that person may have. This is what DEI accomplishes. It's why we started incorporating DEI in the curriculum in the first place, and its removal would irreversibly harm not only our accreditation status, as previously outlined, but it would have downstream effects in making Missouri residencies less competitive and less desirable, but also harming all patient outcomes. Thank you. I'm open for questions.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none. Seeing none. Next in opposition.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Rohit Alada, and I'm a third-year medical student. Speaking on behalf of myself, I would like to go on record in opposition to Senate Bill 410. Throughout my experiences in healthcare, I've cared for and interacted with patients from a wide variety of backgrounds. The opportunity to work closely and develop relationships with people who come from different cultures and communities is one of the reasons I was drawn to healthcare and has been instrumental in my development as a physician and as a person. DEI initiatives in the medical school curriculum have helped me better understand the health disparities that certain groups face and have given me the tools and knowledge to address the unique issues that my patients may deal with. If passed, I believe this bill would directly affect the ability of future medical students to receive the training and expertise necessary to navigate these kinds of interactions and would impact their development as physicians who are able to competently care for patients from all races, ethnicities, religions, genders, and sexual orientations. Medicine has historically been dominated by one group, and while this has changed in the past few decades, medical education is slow to adapt. Despite increased awareness, deficits in our education still exist today. For example, only recently has there been a push for textbooks to include pictures of darker-skinned individuals with certain dermatologic conditions that may present visibly different than in lighter-skinned individuals. To limit discussions related to diversity, equity, and inclusion now would only serve to take us further back in our understanding of how disease processes and socioeconomic factors can impact certain groups of people differently. Through the Hippocratic Oath, we have a moral obligation to provide the best care possible to every patient that we see. In order to do that, we need to have access to education that highlights these differences and how they can be addressed. The social determinants of health can have just as large an impact on a person's well-being as their genetics or environmental exposures. To eliminate these discussions would be a huge disservice to our future patients. Furthermore, as other witnesses have stated today, the LCME is the body that provides accreditation to medical schools. The standards that they published earlier this month state that, quote, the faculty of a medical school ensure that the medical curriculum includes instruction in the diagnosis, prevention, and appropriate reporting and treatment of the medical consequences of common societal problems, end quote. Additionally, they state that, quote, the faculty of a medical school ensure that the medical curriculum provides opportunities for medical students to learn and recognize and appropriately address biases in themselves, in others, and the healthcare diversity process, end quote. DEI is an important part of meeting these standards, and if this bill is passed, accreditation status of medical schools in Missouri could be threatened. In conclusion, as healthcare providers, we have the moral imperative to provide the best medical care possible to our patients, regardless of their race, ethnicity, religion, gender, or sexual orientation. This bill would act as a significant impediment to gaining the knowledge and skills necessary for taking care of all patients, leading to worse health outcomes, and could threaten the ability of Missouri medical school graduates to practice medicine. I therefore oppose this bill and hope that you take these factors into consideration. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none. Next in opposition.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Isa Priyavuda. I'm a medical student speaking on behalf of the South Asian Healthcare Advocacy Group at Mizzou, and we oppose Senate Bill 410. I want to thank my peers for coming out today. I myself drove 2 hours from Springfield, so we are very passionate about opposing this bill. I just want to give a personal anecdote. Many of my peers have given a lot of statistics, which are important. South Asians have the highest death rate from heart disease in the U.S. 60% of the world's heart disease patients are South Asian, despite making up only 25% of the world's population. These statistics are seared into my brain. I've buried many loved ones before it was their time to go. A well-respected, experienced cardiology professor at our school did not know any of these key statistics. He learned it from me, which I find to be very troubling. This is basic epidemiology, under this bill considered optional. I do agree with the author of this bill. Seeing an incompetent doctor is scary. They are the last line between life and death. A poorly educated doctor is a loved one dead. It's happened to me, family members, friends, and countless patients across the country. This gross negligence is a medical and legal liability. DEI education is medical education, inextricable from science and imperative to life. I also want to address some of the comments made by those in favor of this bill. One, there's this false notion that the highest test score equates to the best physician. That is not true. Humans are not robots, and physicians are not mechanics. We are all people. We have all had diverse experiences, different backgrounds, different disadvantages, and doctors, our jobs are to tease out those experiences so we can best create a treatment plan. The truth of the matter is, getting into medical school is nearly impossible, and race plays a role in holding you back or pushing you forward. Diversity and inclusion is a charged term, but in reality, diversity is not just a variety of races, it is a variety of the wonderful factors that make up a unique life. Your job, your genetics, your ancestry, your travel history, your diet, your hobbies, and your lifestyle are important to determining your diagnosis and treatment. We need to know that a soldier of our military is more predisposed to certain viruses. We need to know that plumbers are more likely to be exposed to asbestos and are at increased risk of bronchogenic cancer or mesothelioma. These are real experiences. This is the real world. Our patients need to feel safe to divulge this type of information. They need to see us, again, not as robots that spit out diagnoses and orders, but rather true advocates for their health. Again, diversity and inclusion saves lives. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none. Next in opposition.
Members of the committee, my name is Taylor Laval, and I am speaking on behalf of myself. I would like to go on record in opposition of Senate Bill 410. I'm a medical student at the University of Missouri, and I have had a long road to get to where I am today. I would not be the person sitting in front of you today without my education that I have received. At the beginning of medical school, we took the Hippocratic Oath. Using similar verbiage to justify removing diversity, equity, and inclusion under the pretense of do no harm is a logical fallacy. A logical fallacy is a deceptive or false argument that may seem stronger than it actually is due to psychological persuasion. These are often proven wrong with reasoning and further examination. I'm here today to provide that further reasoning that removing DEI education requirements would cause harm to medical student education, to the healthcare profession, and to the equity of care that patients receive. I grew up in and attended schooling in Franklin and Gasconade counties here in Missouri. These are rural counties that sit between St. Louis and Boone County. There's a especially small percentage of minority population in Missouri and an even smaller percentage in these rural counties. I can count on my hand the amount of people I encountered that did not look like me before attending the University of Missouri. I did not hear about diversity, equity, inclusion in any of the schooling I had up until attending the University of Missouri. Becoming aware of my biases I had were scary. Admitting beliefs I used to hold were wrong and reflecting inward on how to better show up for others than ourselves can be uncomfortable. But you know what is more uncomfortable? Allowing our own lack of knowledge to lead to increased preventable hospitalizations and deaths of minority Missouri residents compared to white residents. If we remove this as a mandatory part of our education, it will be left to self-study or glossed over completely. By passing this bill, you are demonstrating to minority individuals in the state of Missouri that their overall health due to disparities, in part created by a past history of ignorance and a tolerance of mistreatment, is not a priority by current lawmakers in Missouri. Yes, everyone is busy, and another training can seem daunting as we have hours of recertifications that are required every year. However, these mandatory trainings start the conversations. They give the free space for people to share what they have noticed and work together to their peers to open up a free space to offer new perspectives. Throughout my undergraduate and graduate education, I have been able to confront these previous biases I've held. I've worked to show up with a mindset to learn and grow, and I've opened my eyes to the experiences of others around me. Within my generation, we have seen the impact that these mandatory trainings have had. We are no longer asking, what is DEI education? We are now to the point where we're asking in these meetings, what can we do about it? How can we show up better? Where can this show improvement? And I think that is where we've seen the lag in actual improvement. You first have to be able to open up and talk about these things before we can even see tangible action. I believe we are getting to that solution stage now. My generation and those to come are going to be the ones that we see a closing of this minority-based healthcare disparity gap. We have a passion, we have a want for knowledge, and we have the energy to continue improving our healthcare system. But we have to show schools and healthcare institutions that this area is important to invest our time and energy into. I want to thank you today, and I hope that my personal growth through DEI education can be a testament how with knowledge we can grow and better support everyone around us. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing, yes. Excuse me, Senator Hoskins.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Where did you say you grew up or went to high school?
I went to Union High School, that is in Franklin, Missouri,
Okay.
And the rest of my family lives in Gasconade, Missouri.
Okay, all right. And you said that you didn't experience any DEI curriculum until you went to MU, is that?
That is correct.
Okay, so MU's teaching DEI curriculum. And where did you experience that, in your undergrad program or not until?
That's correct. I took a course called Social Inequities, and that was during my undergraduate time. But even before that, just being on Mizzou's campus, I was there in 2015. 2015, we had an outpouring of protests, students getting involved, students finding their voices to finally speak up about the wrongdoings of things that had even been happening at the University of Missouri. And by being in a place that is demonstrating that and moving forward, it was able to show me how much I had to learn and made me more wanting to pursue classes that would talk about that, talk with my peers, and open up to learning more about this field.
Okay, and what year did you say you were in med school? Were you in med school?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm a medical student. I'm a first-year medical student.
Okay.
However, like I said, I've had a long road to get here.
Right.
So I was in undergrad from 2015 to 2019. After completing my undergraduate degree, I worked in research at WashU University in St. Louis for about 3 years. During that time, I also worked as an EMT in St. Louis County and as an EMT and in the ER actually in Dallas, Texas.
Great.
So being in those different areas, I've gotten to see a lot of different diverse groups that were different from where I grew up. And without having that education during my undergraduate curriculum and being exposed to it, I would not be able to have shown up in those areas in the same way that I am today.
And well, congratulations on getting accepted to med school. Did you have to fill out a DEI statement on your application?
Yeah, many applications want to see, what experiences have we had before coming to medical school. I can even see in myself versus...
Is that how it was phrased on your application as far as... how was it phrased on your application as far as DEI?
A lot of times it is, I can't sit, granted, I filled out these applications
Right.
a while
It's
ago
been a
and
while
I don't
back.
have one in front of me.
I understand.
But often it asks, how have your experiences before coming into medical been shaped by either diverse backgrounds, interacting with diverse communities, and I think as mentioned by many people here today, I think what we construe as diversity can often be mistaken. For me, I talked about being a woman growing up in rural Missouri, and I was the only one of somebody in my high school to attend the University of Missouri. I was also the only one that I know to pursue education beyond like a graduate program. And so that in itself is a diversity and a different experience. And so I think that is also needs to be highlighted, that it's not just one thing is diversity, it's everything that makes up who we are, and showing what experiences have led to the person who I am today, and being able to recognize that that's different from your experience, from your experience, from your experience, and how can I best learn and best show up for you based on those circumstances.
My understanding is part of the required MU medical school books, there's one book called White Fragility. Have you read that?
I have read it, but I have read it on my own personal time.
What about Racist Like Me? Have you read that one?
I have not.
Okay.
But going back to...
Do you understand if that is a required reading book for MU medical students?
I'm in my first year, and I have never had anybody require me to read a specific textbook. There are always optional texts that are recommended, but they do not hold us down and force us to read a certain book.
Has anyone ever told you that you have white privilege and that you should? How do you address your white privilege?
Yeah, I think opening up to having conversations about what led me to where I am today and why somebody isn't else sitting in this seat right now. Why is Taylor able to sit here in front of you today and have this conversation and someone else might not be? I think that in itself is a privilege that I am here today and able to defend my opposition of this bill.
Do you think that you have white privilege because you were accepted into med school and some minority was not?
I think Missouri residents, you have 85% of Missouri residents are accepted into the University of Missouri based on state funding. That is a requirement. And so I think Missouri schools are very important. A percentage of those are making sure Missouri residents are accepted into medical school, and I do not think that has held me back. Or
do you think your seat would have been better suited for a minority student because they are more into diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging than you are?
I think that everyone accepted deserves their seat, and I think I've worked really hard to get to where I am today.
It sounds like you have. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Next witness in opposition. Please state your name.
Casey Fogarty. I apologize for the voice. I'm on pediatrics right now, and kiddos have lots of germs, so I've been battling a cold for about a month now. But Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Casey Fogarty, and I'm a current third-year medical student at Missouri School of Medicine, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself today. I'd like to go on record in opposition to Senate Bill 410. I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. Being a city girl, I had very little knowledge about the healthcare disparities experienced in rural areas. My education at Mizzou opened my eyes to these disparities, as well as disparities experienced by other groups traditionally underrepresented in healthcare. Because of this experience, I decided to attend a rural clinical immersion program between my first and second year of medical school, where I absolutely fell in love with rural medicine. I'm now planning on applying to a family medicine residency and ultimately plan on practicing in a rural area. It has been stated that diversity and inclusion education is occurring at the expense of other important aspects of medical education. I disagree. No lecture could have taught me about the joy of caring for a whole family from cradle to grave. No textbook could have taught me how much I would love practicing and living in a rural community. DEI has been enormously positive, or has had an enormously positive impact on my own life, and I believe I'm not an exception to the rule for these programs, but rather the norm. Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, next in opposition.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Paul Wagner, representing the Council on Public Higher Education, which is all of the Missouri's public universities outside of the University of Missouri system. I'm going to take your advice and talk about a new and unique topic as opposed to so this bill doesn't just apply to our, I don't represent any medical schools. We don't have any medical schools. This bill does not just apply to medical schools. It applies to every college in the state, every community college, every tech school. And it applies to every program in every institution. So when the definition of DEI includes things like differences among people based on race or differences among people based on religion, that's talking about pretty much anything in the social sciences, not just in medicine. And we're not just talking about DEI in terms of some kind of political ideology. The definition of DEI says talking about differences among people based on religion or culture, or, you know, so how can you have a course in comparative politics or a course on comparative religions or anything that talks about differences, cultural differences between the North and the South in the United States in the 19th century or something. So the bill is much broader than just medical school and medical students, and I think it just gets into things besides, you know, the politically charged idea of DEI and things like studying human beings, basically. So for all those reasons that are outside of medicine, we have some concerns about the bill as is. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, next witness in opposition.
Thank you, Madam Standing Chair. Rob Monses, Missouri Hospital Association, here to testify in opposition. We've got serious concerns about this as drafted. I appreciate the sponsor's willingness to show some flexibility there. As drafted, this will affect every provider in the state and every hospital for sure. The fiscal note I noted has a listed $148 million impact on the Department of Mental Health's healthcare facilities. I can assure you every other hospital in the state would have a similar type of impact. A number of years ago, starting in about 2012 to 2013, there was a change in the system for reimbursing hospitals at the federal level and changing from the transition from volume to value. And so, and those changes are continuing to evolve. In fact, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, which all hospitals are required to comply with under Medicare, they are adding requirements for advancing health equity. Some of the data that's we're required to start collecting that data in 2023, and there will be further requirements that will show up actually in affecting the reimbursement structure for hospitals in 2024. So the definitions in the bill as it stands now on social determinants of health, you know, there's been a lot of testimony today about the impact on medical schools. The impact on providers is very severe. We have deep concerns about that. So I would hope that we could focus on that and at least make some modifications there if this were to proceed forward. I would also point out that social determinants of health show up in the governor's budget as presented to the General Assembly. In fact, I think there were some provisions in last year's budget related to data collection. There's I know a $15 million new decision item that is focused on rural hospitals, 6 specific hospitals that are they're going to choose at some point in time to focus on social determinants of health. That's an effort put forward by Kirk Matthews, the transformation chief for Mo HealthNet. So there's a lot of implications here. I appreciate the committee's time today and urge some caution as this might proceed.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none. Next in opposition. How many more oppositions do we have? Oh my gosh. We're going to cut this down to about 3 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Johanna Jaraj, and I'm speaking today on behalf of myself. But I would like to go on record in opposition to Senate Bill 410. So I'm a second year in the UMKC BAMD program, and as far as I know, I'm the only one here from that program, and I just wanted to kind of talk about how we don't require the MCAT. And there's a lot of really good reasons for that, and a lot of today's discussion, I think, has been focused on the value of DAI for our curriculum, and that cannot be understated, first of all. But with my area of experience, I'm going to talk more about the MCAT. So every day I'm surrounded by about 100 diverse, wonderful peers of some of the brightest individuals I've interacted with. We all entered the program, or a lot of us entered the program at 18 because of our commitment to medicine and our wanting to make the world a better place. With a program acceptance rate of around 7%, my peers and I were scrutinized based off of our ACT and SAT, separate reference forms, activity sections, technical standards. We have valedictorians, national merit scholars, and a wide array of accomplishments and thousands of hours spent shadowing and volunteering. Many of my peers were accepted into Ivy League schools and top-notch programs with excellent scholarships. But what drew them to our 6-year program in Kansas City, Missouri, is the fact that they didn't have to take the MCAT or any prerequisites to take the MCAT. So this allows our program to bypass physics, calculus, really extensive organic chemistry, because we don't have to take the MCAT, and we can instead delve directly into stuff like medical biochemistry and then extensive human physiology and stuff like that. But if the MCAT was required, this program would have to be longer, and I can guarantee you that many individuals, including myself, would never have stayed in Missouri, would have gone far away, might not have even become physicians. And so not only are you attracting a really wide array of very competitive people, but you're also giving them reasons to stay in Missouri and become physicians that could hopefully address the shortage of physicians in Missouri. And this, I think we have a lot of rural areas in Missouri. I'm from Southwest Missouri myself, and we see so many physician shortages, and the fact that we would try to implement legislation that would further interfere with that seems kind of despicable, to be honest. And the program provides benefits to a wide array of intelligent and achieving students, and the program's success speaks for itself. Graduates perform above the national match rate. UMKC is the top primary care medical school in Missouri, even when competing with our private peers. So there's no need to worry about any reduced academic standards because current systems are outperforming some of the best institutions on the planet. So while this bill is concerned that diversity and inclusion are impeding our medical programs, I think it's worth considering how dismantling current curriculums and systems could be far more detrimental to Missouri. With that, I end my testimony, I'm open to any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none. Next in opposition. Please try not to repeat.
Madam Chair, Shannon Cooper today representing the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce as well as the Civic Council of Greater Kansas City. Maybe bring a little different perspective today. In the Kansas City region, we have almost 90 different ethnic groups. That's 90 different foreign languages. And obviously we oppose this bill because each one of those groups has a different feeling and different outcomes in the medical profession. There's a lot of folks that look like me that trust the medical profession and have always had the opportunity to have the best medical care in the country. And we also have folks that are very skeptical about the medical profession because of their lack of access. All we're saying is that we're training our medical students to understand the diversity and the cultures of these individuals that they are someday going to treat, and that is why we oppose this legislation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Next in opposition.
Good morning. My name is Ryan DeBoof. I represent the Missouri Association of Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons, and I also represent Missouri State University. I want to go on the record in opposition to the bill. I understand concerns that students should be admitted to health programs based on academic qualifications and not demographics. I can understand that. I think this bill goes further than that by getting into things like social determinants of health that we've heard about in the curriculum. It's going to be really problematic, I think, to pull some of those things out. The other thing I would stress, in addition to what Mr. Wagner testified to, the way the bill is written, an institution, by including a health program, now they are required to comply with this for all of their academic programs. So that spreads us out a long ways. Happy to answer any questions.
Seeing none. Next in opposition.
Good morning, members of the committee. Philip Arnzen with the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We'd like to go on the record in opposition. Our primary concern is the provision that prohibits private healthcare providers, which is everything from large hospitals down to individual healthcare providers in private practice, from having DEI policies or teaching DEI policies. And we also believe that this is a new mandate on businesses by requiring them to certify with the Department of Health that they do not have DEI policies or teach DEI policies.
Any questions? Seeing yes. Senator Hoskins.
Thank you. My understanding is the bill just says they can't require it. Is that your understanding? My understanding is that they can't require it, so they could offer it as an optional course or something if that practitioner or student was really interested in learning more about belonging.
So it prohibits them from having any sort of DEI instruction as well, which we believe if you're a private organization, you should be able to have you should be able to run the organization or the business the way that you would like.
I guess I would just respectfully disagree. On line 55 on page 3, it says they do not and shall not require their employees, contractors, volunteers, vendors, or agents to ascribe to the study or to be instructed with DEI ideologies or materials. So this says that they can still teach it, it just can't be a requirement. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. And because I've heard a lot, and it seems like from a lot of the witnesses in opposition, maybe they don't fully grasp what exactly this is trying to do. In my opinion, that if someone wants to study what diseases are most common, if you have Russian origin or African origin or Middle East origin, I don't see anything here that says that you can't study that. And so I know a lot of times you may get a quick email and so they talk about some hot topics and misrepresent what the bill actually does, but I just want to make sure that we're clear that it just says you can't require employees to do it, but it can be offered as an option. So thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Next in opposition. State your name. Short and sweet.
Good morning. My name is Dusty Schneiders. I represent the University of Missouri system, and I want to go on record on being opposed of this Senate Bill 410. First, I want to thank our medical students for coming in. I think they articulated the reasons why we would not be supporting this bill, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none. Next in opposition.
Good morning, Katie Gamble here on behalf of the Missouri Center for Public Health Excellence, the Hal Ford Foundation, and the independent colleges and universities of Missouri. I want to go on record in opposition to what previous witnesses have stated. I do think just in regards to Senator Hoskins' question, and I don't know if this is intentional, but on page 2, institutions have to certify with the department that they're not requiring students to study it. But then at the end, when it talks about certification, it uses the word teaching, and so I don't know if that's where some of the confusion's coming from.
Madam Chairwoman. Madam Chairwoman.
This may be separate,
Senator
but
Haas.
Yeah,
anyways.
which line are you talking about, Katie?
Page 2, line 43, when it talks about required to certify with the department that they're not requiring the statements or that students study it, which is the piece I think you were, well, separate from what you were talking about, but I think it's not saying that you can't teach it. But then when it talks about providing a list to the General Assembly of certification, it does list teaching, and so I don't know if that's where some of that piece is. I think that's a smaller portion to the overall bill.
I'll take a look at that, but it just, I think, again, from what you said on page 2, it says does not require applicants, and so there are testing, each institution of higher education is testing that they don't require applicants or students to study DEI, and like I said, the senators forgot the new one, the belonging, so it should be DEIB now, and I'm sure we'll think of some other ideology besides DEIB. I'm sure there'd be a PQTZW that'll come up next, because it seems like we just keep on changing the name of it in order to teach the same thing. So, yeah, we'll take a look at that. But again, I think it says does not require, so we'll take a look at that as well as on page 3. Because on page 3 it says shall not require. So again, I think it says.
Sorry, page 4, it just, when it's talking about the certifications again, it lists out the word teaching. I don't know if that's where the confusion's coming from. But.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Next in opposition.
Hello.
Hi.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Emily Schaff, and I am a third-year medical student at the University of Missouri Springfield campus, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I would like to go on the record in opposition to Senate Bill 410. With all due respect, on page 3, line 74, it says that no organization that issues healthcare-related professional certifications or provides materials for such certifications shall use DEI ideologies or materials, which it seems to us like you can't provide any kind of DEI materials either because of that terminology there. In addition, I would like to address the concerns that have been brought forward that DEI practices will lower the quality of graduating physicians. What even defines the quality of a physician? As my peers have said, exam scores are only one piece of that puzzle of providing high quality care. We have to be compassionate and high quality communicators, both qualities that are not well measured with MCAT, other test scores, or grades. These qualities can be reflected, though, in the DEI statements that are made by medical school applicants. DEI statements can help differentiate applicants from an already saturated pool of statistically qualified applicants. These statements help applicants to healthcare programs, not just medical school, explain what perspective they can bring to the table and actually bolster the quality of the matriculants. Regardless of matriculant and qualifications, every graduating student must take and pass the same exact board exams as well. For these reasons, I ask that you please oppose this bill and keep our medical schools and other institutions open with high-quality applicants and graduates.
Any questions? Seeing none, next in opposition.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Sarah Schlemer here on behalf of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. We'd like to go on record in opposition of this legislation. Several of our members do serve on the Pregnancy Associated Mortality Review Board. They are trying to figure out why pregnancy disparities and poor health outcomes impact certain populations rather than others. If there is a fix to that, which we would love to find through this research, this bill would preclude it for being mandatory to be taught to medical students who could go out and then fix the wrongs that have happened with the pregnancy, poor outcomes that are happening in our state. So for that reason, we'd like to go on record in opposition. Happy to take any questions.
Questions? Seeing none, next in opposition.
Madam Chair, Members of the committee, Randy Scher representing the Missouri Psychiatric Physicians Association. I'm certainly not an expert in this area, but you had several expert witnesses testify earlier on and gave personal experiences about what this kind of training helped them with their psychiatric diagnosis and treatment. So I'm going to yield the rest of my time. So,
Any questions? Seeing none. Next in opposition.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Chris Shropey here on behalf of University Health over in Kansas City, testify against the bill for many of the reasons that Mr. Monses testified to on behalf of MHA. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none. Next in opposition. Informational purposes only. Are you informational?
No, I'm opposition. I'm sorry.
Opposition.
Yep, apologies. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Mandy Hegseth. I'm the Director of Policy and External Affairs with Missouri Family Health Council. We administer the Title X Federal Family Planning Program and also a state-based contraceptive equity initiative called The Right Time. We serve over 40,000 patients across the state of Missouri, and our network includes nurse practitioners as well as MDs. Quite simply, we believe these bills undermine patient-centered and trauma-informed care, which are foundational of quality family planning services and standards, and we work to eliminate racial biases, inequity through training, ongoing technical assistance, program compliance, and quality improvement. We appreciate your time today and urge your opposition to this bill.
Any questions? Seeing none. One last call. Opposition. Informational purposes only. This concludes the hearing then on Senate Bill 410.
Fill one